Got to let go of the past, got to let go of the future, you got to dwell in the now. But what do you do with the past and the future when you dwell in the now? The precious present is really the only place we've got, and there's been so much said in recent years, thanks to Eckhart Tolle, about being in the power of the now. Myrtle Fillmore said almost 100 years ago that you have to let go of the past, let go of the future, and dwell in this precious present, because this is the only moment that has any energy or any life. And so she didn't even read Eckhart Tolle. So there's been an understanding of this power of the now that's ancient. It's ancient. Winston Churchill said, almost 100 years ago, when you let the past contend with the present, you lose the future. We've got to let go of the past, we've got to release the future, and we've got to live in the present. But what do we do with the past and the future? The essence of everything, the essence of the past is yours right now. The other stuff's gone. I shared it at 9 about my family background. My family moved to the gold country in California in 1850. There's a reason why they were called 49ers, because the people who were there in 49 got all the claims. So my family had to sell supplies to the guys who had all the claims. They probably made more money that way. But on the side, because they owned a ranch, there was a little bit of gold there. And Uncle Johnny, my dad's great uncle, Uncle Johnny, was he made his money as a bootlegger. And and on the side he would do a little mining, but that's pretty much what he did. Now his brother was the judge, so they were both alcoholics. So what would happen is the bootlegger would be busted, be brought before the judge, and get a stern warning, and then would go back to his work. And then to make extra money on the side, he would do a little gold mining. So my mom still has in her basement Uncle Johnny's sluice box, and the sluice box is where you put it in a creek, and that's where you usually found your gold because of all the erosion that would happen. And you put all the ore into the sluice box, and you shake it around real good, let the water go through it, and then what's left in the bottom is what? The gold. What happens to all the rock and the ore and the dirt and the stuff? It's all dissolved, it's all washed away. Your past is like that. There's an essential aspect to your past that's important. Hold on to the essence, but let the rest go. You say, how do I let the rest go? We've got the 7-step method, which you can do your journaling. We've got some wonderful pieces of paper outside of fellowship. You can do the journaling questions and release the past and take it up the 7 steps. There's a lot of processes, but the important thing is to let it go and be in the precious present. I let it go and I am in the precious present. Together. I let it go and I am in the precious present. And sometimes circumstances help you to let it go. Sometimes you don't have a circulation day where you can go through your closets and your garage and everything you have with the question in your mind, have I used this in the last 12 months? And if the answer is no, bring it. Friday between 1 and 8, or Saturday, if you can't make it Friday, you can still bring it. We'll accept it. Now you say, well, what if I need it in my next year? Okay, so you can add a second question. Am I going to use this likely in the next 12 months? And if the answer is yes, you can hold on to it. But if you didn't use it in the last 12 months, and you use it in the next 12 months, what are you doing holding on to it? Let it go. I remember being in an astronomy class. It was night school in college, and I had to fulfill my science requirements. So I took astronomy, and there were a lot of older people there who, younger than I am now, but still they seemed very old. And there was one woman who wasn't really getting it, and he was talking about the Big Bang and how the universe was expanding at an infinite rate, and it was all going to go off into who knows what. And this woman raised her hand in the back of the room. She says, but what? We should do something about this. What are we going to do about all those galaxies that are going off into nothingness? And the professor looked at her and said, let them go, madam. Let them go. Let it go. I let it go. Together. I let it go. Because if you don't let it go, if you don't, this sounds kind of ominous, but if you don't willingly let it go, like circulation day, sometimes circumstances come up like this. I moved, my second church was a church in Hawaii. Be careful what you ask for. I went on vacation in Hawaii for the first time. I said, I'd love to live here. So I ended up with a church that I showed up on the 3rd anniversary, I was their 5th minister, and 4 ministers had left in an 11-month period. That means every 12 weeks I got a new minister. Now I stayed there for 3 years, and the guy after me stayed there for, I think, 10 or 12 years. So I cleaned up that wonderful consciousness, almost killed me. But in order to do that, I had to let go of my past consciousness. I had to get in a whole new mindset, and the way that happened was, when the barge came over with all my stuff, it went to the wrong island and it kept all my stuff there for a year. I lived out of suitcases. And then, and I've told this story before, I moved 6 times in the next year. 6 times. For most of that time, I was living in 300 square feet. But I got to let go of my personal history. You may not need to do that. I'll never forget the woman in my very first church who was 87 years old, and she said, 3 years ago, I had a fire in my apartment. I lost everything I had. Thank God for that. My kids don't need that crap, and I sure as hell don't need it either. Inappropriate language in church, it was hers. 87 years old. Would you take that attitude? Are you willing to let go of your personal history and hold on to the essence? You can't take it with you. The only things that are valuable in life are the invisible things. The things that can be taken from you aren't yours anyway. Nothing can be taken from you. Nothing can be taken from you. So there I was, and dealing with all the stuff and the turmoil that was going on, I was doing my dutiful journaling. You know, it's important to deal with your past. And somebody said, look at your past, don't stare at it. So I was dealing with my past, and I was journaling. I was on the beach at Lani Kai across the street from where I live, and I was lying there, and there a dog came up, and I was just journaling, which is good, but I was obsessing about it. And this dog came up and stole my slipper. Well, I don't know what you call them here, but they call them slippers in Hawaii. Flip-flops or whatever. And so I went running after the dog, and he had 2 other dogs with him, and they were playing catch with it. They were taking it. One would take it, and the other one would take it, and they were having so much fun with me. Finally, I got it, and I realized they were playing with me, and they wanted to have it back. So we started having fun, and I realized they thought I was a dog. I was in the moment. I was in the precious present. I was having so much fun with these dogs. And we were splashing around in the surf, and I was blowing things, and then just having such a good time. And all of a sudden I thought, and one of them kind of looked up at the other one and started howling. And I thought, oh wow, if I'm a dog, I could do that too. So I started going, and they all looked at me like, whoa, he really is a dog. And we had such a great time in the moment. You know, animals live in the moment. They don't have a future, they don't have a past. They live in the moment. I was having such a good time, and after about 45 minutes of this, I went, oh, wait a minute. I must get back to my important work. It is so important for me to do this. So I took my slipper and I went back and I started doing it. And they're coming up and they're like kicking sand in my face, trying to get me to be a dog again. No, I'm busy. And actually the dog stole my slipper again and went out as far out in the surf as he could with it. And I finally got it from him, and I came back, and finally the dog looked at me with a look on his face that said, you're too stupid to know that it's better to be a dog. What's wrong with you? And then they just, and they went off. It was only later I figured out that they really giving me a gift. I was in the precious present. Now, there's okay to live in your past, to look at your past, but don't live in it. You know, Carolyn Mace calls that woundology. She once spoke to a symposium at Findhorn in Scotland, and she said the first thing that happened, a woman sat down across from her, and she introduced herself. The woman introduced herself and started telling her that all about all the traumas of her past, her childhood stuff. She said the woman identified herself as her past. You are not your past. You learn from your past. It's refined gold that you can use. It's a foundation. You can't live in a foundation. You build in a foundation. But you do use it as a foundation. I am not my past. Together. I am not the past. I gain the value of my past and I move on. Together. I gain the value of my past and I move on. Jesus was brutal about this. Jesus was brutal about this. Wonderful, famous quote. A man said to Jesus as they were walking along the road, I'm going to follow you anywhere you go. And Jesus said, foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to even lay down his head and rest. I mean, do you really know what you're getting into here? We live in the now moment. There's no place to fall asleep. You have to be present. You've got to be conscious. It's about growth. It's about your spiritual growth. It's about my spiritual growth. Together? It's about my spiritual growth. And yet we're attached to those things in the past and the future that drag us and take our energy away. So he was warning this guy, you're going to be living in the now moment. Are you up to it? Then he said to another man, follow me. You, follow me. But the man replied, Lord, first let me go and bury my father. Jesus said to him, let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and proclaim the kingdom of God. That was not nice at all. You know, Linda Brayhall is going to teach a class about grief. Could you imagine her saying that to people in a grief class? But you got to understand what he's talking about. In their culture, there were very seriously, rigidly prescribed roles, societally and religiously, that they had to follow when somebody like your father, you had to, probably the oldest son, had to take care of all the estate, all the rest of the family, do a lot of rituals. And it would take up to a year. And Jesus wasn't going to be around that long. So he's saying, look, you let the dead bury their own dead, but look in your own life. If you move ahead with your spiritual growth, if you do what's in your heart to do, if you are who you really are, is there anyone in your life or any aspect of your own mind that says to you, oh, you can't do that. You've got to take care of the dead. You've got to take care of, the societal thing or the thing that people want you to do. Maybe you aren't following the religious belief or the practices or the cultural norms or the pictures that people have. Let the dead bury the dead. Together? Let the dead bury the dead. That's old energy, that's useless energy, it's dead energy. Now, this sounds unkind, but it's a loving person enough to let them be where they are. We have a tendency to say, well, if somebody wants to hold us back, now I'm going to explain to you exactly where I'm coming from, and you're going to listen to me, and this is what you need to understand about blah, 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 blah. And is that kind? It's not kind. It's not loving. Let them be. Let the dead bury the dead. And an aspect of your own subconscious that wants to hold you back. Something you were taught about in your background, your church, your family, something. And it's that little voice inside here. Let the dead bury the dead. Together? Let the dead bury the dead. Let it go, madam. Let it go. And then it goes on. Still another one said, I will follow you, Lord, but first, let me go back and say goodbye to my family. And Jesus said, nobody who puts their hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God. But what would have happened? You would have gone back and they would have said, now, Johnny, you should do this and this and this. You can't go. Who's this Jesus guy? You do this. You've got these responsibilities. They would have pulled on him. But it's not somebody outside of yourself. It's an aspect of your own being that's holding you back. That's saying, don't grow. Be caught up in all the trivial pursuits. Stay stuck in the past, resentments. Eric Butterworth said, you have every right to hold on to your past resentments. You also have every right to let them make you sick. Let go. Let go of them. Let go of them. So, letting go of the past, releasing the past. Lynn and I are part of a meditation group. And there were 15 of us living in Kansas, and we all knew we were going to move. We all knew intuitively we were going to move. We didn't know where. And so we all decided we're going to let go of everything that we wouldn't be using. Very much like Circulation Day. Only that church didn't have a Circulation Day. So what we did was we went through our stuff. Now, we had accumulated so much stuff that we lived on a corner lot in a big house, and every square inch of the lawn on both sides, and it was a very large lawn, was covered with the stuff that we let go of. Thousands and thousands of things. And we let them all go. And everybody else in the group did it. Then and only then, when we released all our stuff, did it reveal to itself where we're going to move and what we're going to do. And we all moved together and we did a wonderful, great work that was ours to do. Be willing to let go of the past. Let go of the past. And then the precious present. In the precious present, you will create a glorious future. There's that wonderful story, I'm sure you've heard it, about Abraham Lincoln. And about how, you hear Abraham Lincoln failed over and over and over again before he was successful. And yet he learned from every one of those experiences. He didn't judge it according to the momentary success or failure. He moved forward. just a sidelight. I remember I heard about Winston Churchill when he lost his first parliamentary election, was so positive about it and said to the opponent, "The world has not heard the last of either one of us," that his opponent went out and checked the election figures because he thought maybe he'd lost. Churchill was so positive about it. But Lincoln learned from every one of his experiences, and in this experience, they had a general store, he and his partner, and they'd failed. And they'd sold everything out, and it was the last day. They were down to their last 50 cents, and this wagon came up, he wrote, with a family, and they looked gaunt and hungry. And the husband said, "I got a good barrel here I could sell you for 50 cents. 50 cents was a fair amount of money in those days. He didn't need a barrel. But he had just said to his partner said, "What are you going to do?" He said, "I want to be an attorney. I know I should be an attorney. I need to get Blackstone's Commentary on the Law." That was the book that people would self-teach themselves to be attorneys. They didn't go to college to do it. There weren't a lot of law schools. So he needed this, but it was an incredibly expensive book. Anyway, he said to the man, "Well, I reckon I could use a good barrel." Gave him his last 50 cents, and his partner chided him. And at the end of the day, he rolled the barrel back inside, and he heard a thunk. He reached in. It was Blackstone's Commentary on the Law. It was in the barrel. And he said, "I looked up at the sky, and I realized that God was telling me to get ready for something. Why else this miracle?" When you let go of the past, and you dwell in the precious present, and you follow your guidance in the moment, the future will be assured. But it will be a different future, perhaps, than you have in mind. You have to let go of outcomes. I've been praying with somebody who's had a very difficult diagnosis medically, probably more serious than anyone in this room, and yet this person has more joy in their heart and more eager anticipation and excitement about and embracing of the precious present moment than probably any one of us. Why? Because she realizes what is important, releasing the outcomes and being in this moment. And certainly creating with her consciousness that which she desires to take place, but not being locked into the outcome, letting go of the outcome. Letting go of the past, and also letting go of the future. Worry is fear projected into the future. Worry is fear projected into the future. The Unity Church in San Angelo, Texas, Mary Ann Bowers was the minister there. She was Catherine Ponder's editor, and she was my classmate. And they had a mortgage, they had a balloon payment due, and they didn't have money for it. And it was the day of that it was due. And they held hands, and she was with her class, and they did a prayer, and she said, "God is never late." And they all affirmed, "God is never late." She felt something funny, but she didn't really pay any attention to it. And she went back to her office and looked in her pocket. Somebody had slipped a check for the exact amount with just a few hours to go. She said, "God is rarely early, but he's never late." Being in the now moment and creating the future with faith and entrusting the outcome to God. In the newsletter, I wrote an article, and in it I talk about a Unity New Thought television program in Los Angeles called There Is a Way. Dale Batesole, the Unity minister, had more viewers on a daily basis at its peak than the Today Show did. But the way it happened was amazing. What happened was this. He got a phone call from a guy who said, "If I gave you $500,000, what would you do with it?" It's a very interesting call. In today's money, it's $1.3 million. This was in the 1970s. So he told him, "Come on down, I'll show you my plan." You see, he had in his drawer a plan, never mind how to do it, of what he wanted to do. If money was no object, what would you do? He asked himself that question, and he wrote it down. And it was to reach out to people with this television program. Well, the guy had gone through, he was a real estate developer who had made a killing, and his accountant told him, "This year you got to give away $500,000 not to be killed in taxes." And he went through the entire Yellow Pages. He was non-religious. He had no knowledge. He wasn't raised in Christianity, but he just figured, well, it's not for profit. He went through the Yellow Pages in Palm Beach, and Palm Springs, California, and went through all the churches, got to Unity, and Dale Batesole invited him down. He said, He gave Dale Bates all the money, and the reason why, he said, is everybody else had something that served themselves. It was about building a new building, or building a new wing, or hiring a new staff, or doing something for us internally. But these people were reaching out. He was reaching out in service. Where are you in spiritual service in your life? Not in a grandiose sense, but in a sense of reaching out. The guy made a killing the next year, gave him the same amount of money, but the third year he did not. And that's where our church came in. My very first church had never tithed. It was established in 1923. And we sold some land next door. I finally got the board to agree to begin to give away 10% of our income to outside sources that served us spiritually. And there was a way it was watched by everybody in the church. So we cut a check for the exact amount that they owed within 48 hours. I found this out 6 months later. He didn't tell me right off the bat. 6 months later, he told me that if we hadn't written the check, they would have gone off the air. And they had 48 hours. And they continued to grow and grow and grow until they finally outpolled the Today Show. Where in your life do you need to engage with your spiritual practices? Where in your life is your soul pushing out and calling you to spiritual growth? It isn't about getting an outcome in the physical world. It's about learning and growing, using everything in your past for your spiritual growth, taking all of the yearning of the future and entrusting it to God. And sometimes that means setting intentions. Sometimes that means writing down your goals and your affirmations. My son, his favorite comic is Dilbert. How many people know about Dilbert? Raise your hand. Dilbert? I think it's still around, but anyway, I was reading a Dilbert, and it talked about affirmations, and it was Dilbert talking to Dogbert, and Dogbert was writing, and Dilbert said, "What's all the writing?" And Dogbert said, "Well, I'm writing about affirmation. I'm writing my affirmations." And Dilbert said, "What are affirmations?" He said, "Well, I write down 15 times a day something that I would like to see happen, that's unlikely to happen, and then it comes about." "Well, then why are you writing, Dilbert will be eaten by a garden slug?" Because it's the only thing I could think of. But then I did a little research, and I found out that Scott Adams actually became successful because of this. He was a middle-level manager for Pacific Gas and Electric in the San Francisco Bay Area, and some friend of his told him about affirmations. So he began to write down these affirmations several times a day, and they said, pick something unlikely to happen. So he said, "I, Scott Adams, will become rich in the stock market." About the 7th or 8th day, he woke up in the middle of the night, buy Chrysler. He just knew, buy Chrysler. Well, this was during Chrysler's first bailout back, I think, in the 70s. It was a very unlikely stock. But he went out and he set up, there's the days before you could do this online quickly, so it took a while to set up his account, and he finally set up his account, and by the time he did it, it had gone up 20%, so he figured it peaked and he didn't buy it. It went up 200 to 300% that year. He went, there's something to this, so he does something even more unlikely. I, Scott Adams, am a successful syndicated cartoonist. And he figured that was unlikely because he said, I can't draw. Just look at my comics. And then after he became established, he set the goal, I, Scott Adams, have a #1 New York Times best-selling book. And he did. And also #2 and #3 at the same time. Where in your life are you willing to set those goals from the precious present, not out of fear, worry? Jesus said, don't worry about the future. Let the future worry about itself. Each day's got enough trouble as it is. Let go of the future. Don't worry about the future. That's fear projected into the future. But instead, in the precious present, take your energy and set an intention without attachment to outcome. And then let that which is for your highest good come forth. And powerful things will happen. I just get it's time for us to do our prayer. A lot more I could say, but you know what? That's all in the future. That's all in the past. Right here, right now. Let's just take your energy and withdraw it from the past and bring it into the precious present. Pull it back from the future, any worries or fears, and bring it to this precious present. And know that God is never late, that you're taken care of in a beautiful way in this now moment. and willingly let go of anything that's holding you back in the past, anything that you've allowed to pull you back into that past energy. Just loose it and let it go. Take as your affirmation, I cast this on God and I go free, silently. Silently, I cast this on God and I go free. You are in the precious present. You are free. And now take all your future yearnings and desires and just say, I cast this on God and I go free, silently. And in the precious present, all is well. A feeling of peace and well-being sets in. This is the presence of God. You can feel the energy in the room, the vibration all around you. Release the past, embrace the future, and live in this precious present. Thank you, God. Amen. And now take a deep breath, and as you let it out, set down all paper and pencils and anything you've got occupying you. Because this is the time in which you dwell in the precious present. Jesus said, do not worry about the future. Let the future worry about itself. Today's got enough troubles as it is, he said. So let go of the future. And let go of all things distracting you. And imagine that you're pulling your energy back from the future to this now moment. And now let go of the past. Release all your attachment to those past experiences and imagine that you pull your energy from the past back into the precious present. In this moment, all is well. All is safe. All is complete and secure. In this moment of pure being, the presence of God is made known. And the soul of you, that soul is yearning to express and is calling you, is saying there is something that I'm calling you to do, which is to grow. To act in the best interests of your soul and to learn from every past experience. God, we let go of the story. We release our personal history and release past experiences, but we take into this precious presence all that we may have learned. And let it be the refined gold of this moment, which we use as the basis for creating a future satisfaction, good outcomes, a future that we can feel joy and excitement and expectancy about without being attached to any outcome. So in this moment, we take a moment to give our consent to complete release and let go of all past experiences. And all that remains is the essence, the learning, the growing, the lessons learned. And now we embrace in this precious present, in this moment, good outcomes, imagining that good things are happening, that our future is moving ahead. Certainly we hold intention and vision, and yet we let go of our attachment to outcomes. We're fully embraced and fully surrendered, fully engaged, and yet we release all outcomes. And we go forward with a spirit of enthusiasm, joy, excitement, peace, and good energy. And so it is. Amen.